Do you believe that Joe McCann had something to do with your daughter's death?
It's under investigation, and we don't know what went on.
It's under investigation, and like we said, we just want transparency.
Today, investigators in Tanzania held a news conference where they said they are questioning McCann and they are holding his passport until the autopsy results are complete.
We have an active death investigation regarding American Ashlee Robinson, who was a luxury influencer and went by the name of Ashlee Jenae. This case has all types of jurisdictional limits, timeline gaps, and red flags that deserve our scrutiny. As of the latest reporting and taping of this show, Thursday, April 16th, Tanzanian police are questioning Ashlee Jenae's fiancé, Joseph Isaac McCann. They have held his passport, and quite truthfully, no charges have been filed just yet. They're waiting for medical and forensic results. Ironically, as of 5 hours ago, we just got word through TMZ that at least the autopsy showed that that she had suffered cerebral hypoxia. However, they have classified this as a possible self-harm case. And Reuters reports that the couple arrived in Zanzibar on April 4th for a birthday/engagement/travel excursion. And everything looks like what you would expect. But April 9th, everything changed. And after they were separated during a reported domestic conflict, later that night, she was found unresponsive inside a closet with a belt around her neck. She's taken to the hospital and she dies. Now, at this point, a lot of people stop thinking and they hear that and they go straight to the conclusion. But that's not how it works, and it won't work like that here on this show.
This is the Hill of Justice.
I'm Jerome Hill, state investigator, former police officer, and with me is retired Sheriff Victor Hill. So we talk about the exact movement timeline. We want to talk about the villa key cards, if there are any. We looked at the CCTV coverage gaps that there is, and according to their website on Zanzibar, Zuri, that's the luxury resort that they were standing on, they even claim that their CCTVs are outside of the property and in the common areas. So we have that. We have the medical intervention timelines. We just don't have scene preservation. We don't know anything about the ligature marks, the anchor points, the phone extraction with the messages, if there's any type of deletions. So we have a family that was told a status information. And even then, they are ticked off because we're talking about an 11-hour time gap. So we got a self-harm case, allegedly. They didn't frame it as that. They went about saying it was a possible SUA. So for purposes of YouTube, we can't really say the word. But those are the investigative questions right now.
Unalive.
Right. We're just unalive, self-harm, so on and so forth. But there's a lot of questions that deserve a real answer. And we need to seriously break down instead of the gossip that is going on. And I will tell you that me and a few other people did hear about some of the gossip that's going on. And quite truthfully, what's going on in social media, people are claiming all types of patterns, and they're claiming that they've spoke to the FBI sources and everything like that. Just to let you know, you can get sued for defamation. So I would just hold up on that. We're going to be a bit responsible on here. Brother, what are some of your thoughts that you have about this?
Well, I worked homicide over a decade. And, I don't know if you really should call homicide detectives. You should really call them death investigators. And the reason I say that is because when you go to a scene, the worst thing you can do is jump to a conclusion. The hardest thing about being an investigator, you got to keep an open mind, because sometimes things aren't just what you think they are. They're just not. It looks like it's one thing and then it's really another. And a death investigator has to make a determination through physical evidence or confirmation, rather, because there's only 4 reasons why people die. It's either a homicide, a suicide, an accidental death, or a natural death. And of course, in rare occasions, it's undetermined because it may be so much decay to the body that there's no real evidence to determine how the person died. But once you start reconstructing crime scenes, I've been to suicides that look like homicides. I've been to homicides that look like suicides. There are natural deaths that can look like a homicide. And sometimes when you find people in an accidental death, you got to be real careful, because I've worked those scenes too. I've worked scenes where it appeared to be a car accident, but then when you pull the person out the car, there's a bullet wound in them. So, the accident happened as a result of the person being shot and running off the road into somebody else. So I will concede this. If you look at the circumstances, it's suspicious. Yes, it is. Okay. But, this is going to be pretty easy to figure out. If they're 10 minutes away from each other and there are cameras on these resorts, which they usually are, and there's no camera footage of him entering her room before the time this happened, well, that eliminates him as a suspect right there. So it's not that hard. And then there's other things too that you got to look at as well too. When we go to suicides, you're looking for other things. You're looking for defensive marks. Was this person in a fight before? Because if you're just hanging yourself or whatever, then you shouldn't have a black eye and bruises on your legs and everything like that, because the only thing you should have is something around your neck. So once this autopsy is complete, once all the camera footage is coming, it's going to be pretty simple. I'm going to have to remain 50-50 on this, because the worst thing that investigators can do is jump to conclusions. We've seen this throughout history. Everybody, it looked like John Benet Ramsey family did it, but they didn't. But it looked like it. It looked like Richard Jewell was the bomber in Atlanta, but he wasn't. And when you got investigators that they lock in on a theory because, this don't look right or whatever, sometimes things don't look right. But when you get all of the facts and put it together, it's not what it appears. Mm-hmm. And I've been the victim of that on several occasions too. And, we got to remain 50. It's very possible that this is a homicide, and it's very possible it's a suicide. Now, it gets very, very emotional, because in my years in homicide, when we make a determination about suicide, that's a hard thing for a family to accept. It's a very hard thing to accept. And because no one's going to believe, well, I don't believe that my child, my brother, my sister, or someone would commit suicide. And that's understandable. But at the end of the day, this is going to boil down to the physical evidence. And if a thorough autopsy is done, if I could see the crime scene photos and everything, it's not going to be that hard to make that determination. They're doing the right thing by holding his passport in case it is a homicide. They don't want to let him go. But at the same time, how many people have been charged or prosecuted because everybody jumped to a conclusion, and that's what the theory was, and then the investigator, I have to investigate to prove a theory instead of investigate to find out the facts. So I have to remain open. It's very possible it could go either way, but the physical evidence is going to tell the story.
Sure. And let's go ahead and break this and reconstruct this whole scene. And let's start with the 11th hour gap that there is a great deal of question. So here's where the case actually starts. The fiance says he found her along with the security guard in her room, unresponsive, hanging in the closet. But the family, they say they didn't hear anything for about 11 hours. 11 hours. Now, I want not you, brother, but I want our audience to think like an investigator. And when something like this happens, what do most people do? They call for help immediately. They notify other people immediately. They don't wait. So now the question isn't just what happened to her. The question becomes what happened during those 11 hours. Who was called? Who wasn't called? Was there any hesitation? And here's something that a lot of people may not think about or miss. When did the U.S. Embassy get notified? Because that timeline matters too. And delays by themselves don't prove anything, but delays can also prove something else is going on. And they always mean something.
Yeah, and let me tell you about that. Here's another thing I found as an investigator, and I'm not out ruling homicide. I'm not telling you I think this guy's innocent, and I'm not telling you I think he's guilty. I need more facts. You're never going to get me to jump to conclusions on anything because I've seen it happen too much, and it's happened to me when people jump to conclusions. But people respond in ways that we don't think is logical. I once worked what we thought was a homicide, and we actually locked him up. But it was a woman we found dead. They had a history of domestic violence. He calls the police saying she's unconscious, and when everyone gets there, he's gone. He doesn't even stay. So I get called there. Her eyes are closed. I open her eyes and I see petechial hemorrhage. And for those not familiar with it, that's something. Anytime you examine a dead body, one clue of strangulation is if their eyes aren't open, you want to open it, and there's these dots you'll see. It's the vessels that break when you strangle somebody. And we took pictures of it. It looked like petechial hemorrhaging, and it looked as if though she was strangled. And the position of the body was very, very strange. Question this guy and ask him what happened. He says, I don't know. And I said, well, there's evidence of strangulation. How do you explain that? And his exact quote to me, I don't know. The bitch must have strangled herself. Exactly what he said. Mm-hmm. And I was like, really? Well, guess what? The autopsy comes back with proof that this is not a strangulation. And it turned out it was some type of natural death. Actually, it had to do, they were both using drugs. Okay. So when you looked at that circumstance, the fact that we had domestic violence reports where they'd been in fights before, he calls the police saying, hey, I don't know what's wrong with her. And then he leaves. And then, he gets a while, hey, why did you leave? I didn't want to be there when y'all were there. I know y'all going to think I did something. You know what I'm saying? So after years of experience in this thing, you got to be very, very, very careful and look for the facts, because it's easy to jump to a conclusion. Mm-hmm. If it turns out it's a murder, I wouldn't be surprised. If it turns out it's a suicide, I wouldn't be surprised. Really, this boils down to the physical evidence. Right. And at the end of the day, if there's cameras around there, and the cameras, once they're separated, and there's no way he could have got there during the time that happened, well, that throws the whole murder thing out. Mm-hmm. But if there's cameras showing him going there in that direction and then leaving and then getting security and coming back, that's an issue. But if he just went there with security, at the end of the day, that's the most important evidence. Next to up with the autopsy reports and everything with the body. It is possible. I have seen people get in arguments and get emotional and go take their life afterwards.
Sure.
And we've seen that before.
Mm-hmm.
So right now, we can't depend on the media. The media is going to put anything out there to keep ratings up. Everyone's going to run out there. Anyone that has a podcast is going to jump on a theory. Something's not right or whatever like that. And I will admit, there are some suspicious things. Two people that are happy and next thing this happens. But we have seen that before. And we have seen situations where people are happy and there's a murder. But at the end of the day, the autopsy and the cameras tell the story.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the location. And so a lot of people completely overlook this. And this didn't happen here in the United States. It involved two U.S. citizens. But this happened in Tanzania, and particularly at a resort called Zuri Zanzibar. It is in Kedwa, a village of Zanzibar. It's northwest of the coast. It's south of the country, Kenya. And under the authority of the Tanzanian police force, this is what it means. They control the scene. They control the witnesses. They control the evidence. And here's the part that nobody really wants to talk about. The FBI does not. So the investigations don't look the same everywhere. And in different countries, they handle scenes differently. That's just the way it is. They prioritize evidence differently. They classify deaths differently. And then you have to add something else on top of that, language. So the language over there is Swahili. And you got statements, were they given clearly? Were they translated properly? Were they summarized right? And because no one has the best translation, and one bad translation can cause the meaning of everything. It could change the whole outlook of the investigation. Now, this is not some separate private island setup. Zanzibar is policed within the broader Tanzania police force. And why does that matter? It's because the Tanzanian police force and materials come from Old English. They were under British rule until 1961. Thus, they do have that colonial feel over there. And they use that policing structure much like we use over here. That's not to say that anything couldn't have happened that was way different from that, but it matters in this.
Well, that was my concern too. I've been places, I've been to countries in parts of Africa where there is no police, there is no 911. The soldiers handle everything. There's no correctional officers. If you're taken in custody, soldiers guard you. There's no correctional officers, no police, no ambulance. It depends. And there are places where there are police. I've been to countries there as an advisor, they have police, but the level of technology or the level of training is very, very low. So they're not really trained in blood pattern analysis, crime scene reconstruction. The fact that you said that they have ties to Britain is very, very hopeful, because that means that perhaps they might be one of those countries that, if that's the case, they train at Scotland Yard. And Scotland Yard, well, of course, the father of policing, Norman Vincent Peale, that all started in Scotland Yard and over there anyway. So they're pretty advanced. I've been to Scotland Yard before and learned a lot from them. And they've got some I'm not saying they're perfect, but they're very advanced in a lot of ways. So that's very, very hopeful in that right there. So that was one thing I was concerned about. I wasn't so much concerned about the language barrier, because language barrier mostly deals with getting statements or confessions and stuff like that. I was more so concerned with the level of police technology as far as crime scene reconstruction, autopsy, and stuff like that. But the fact that they're doing an autopsy says a lot. Because I've been to third world countries where there is no autopsy.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right.
I mean, you can't even dial 911 and have an ambulance respond. You get in a car accident, you just crawl out there and hope somebody come get you and give you a ride to the hospital. So that's very hopeful in itself right there. And
Right.
So based on you saying that, I believe they have the technology to make that determination.
It looks like it. It looks like they have the discipline that aligns more so with, of course, our methodologies over here than anything else. I'm not saying it's an exact science over there, but I think you used the word hopeful, and thus that is the driving force. There
At
happens to
the end
be
of the day, even with technology, you can have all the technology you want and all the training. And look at all the botch investigations we have here in America.
well, that's
It
true.
really depends on the investigator, his mindset, his training. Like I said, I gave two famous cases right there.
Yeah.
Those folks were very trained, but when you get people and they lock in, you're not discussing a
You
little
brought
this
up a
before.
serious
There's different
point.
type of investigations out there. There are
Mhm.
investigations where people, we just investigate someone because we don't like him and we want to find some type of criminal prosecution to put on them. That's
Sure.
lawfare. Or you go to a scene and then you lock in on a theory or whatever. So a lot of it, even if you got a place where they have access to that type of stuff, we've seen all type of weird stuff due to politics getting involved, personal bias getting involved, people locking in on a suspect and not wanting to be wrong. So they stick with that. And we've seen, and that's probably why we have 50,000 wrongful convictions every year, at least 50,000, probably a whole lot more than that.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the word that jumps out from what you just said was mindset. And that is the next situation or next phase that's driving everything here. the police over there went about saying that this was a possible suicide. And listen, I understand that phrase isn't crazy, but police use it all the time early on. It's just a placeholder. But here's where it gets dangerous. The moment that phrase hits, we're talking about everything starts to shift. And there's a little bit about mindset that you're talking about. Investigators start looking for confirmation. And we talk about confirmation bias. Witnesses start adjusting their stories. The public stops asking those hard questions. And if you're not careful, the placeholder turns into a conclusion. And that's why I would rather be it called a death investigation and instead of a suicide. And once that happens, you're not investigating anymore. We've talked about this. You're just supporting a theory. And we've gone through this
I
over
gotta
and over.
agree. I gotta agree with you on that, and we see that. I tell you where we see it a lot. At you see it with officer-involved shooting. You
Right.
see chiefs and sheriffs get on there. It's officer-involved shooting. It appears to be a good shooting, and you don't have all the facts yet. It could be an execution, or you get up there and you crucify the officer. This is not what we're about. This does not follow our policy. And then you already convicted him in front of everybody, and it turns out it was justifiable. You know, again, it's very, very early to get that. And that's why when I was sheriff, I never did press conferences, especially about officer involved shootings, because basically I said we had officer involved shooting, the GBI is being called to investigate, and all further questions have to go there. I think we've all seen these dummy press conferences where people get up there and talk about, well, I can't answer that. Well, we don't know that right now. We don't know that. Well, if you don't know and can't answer, why are you up there talking?
Sure.
And if you're not the one investigating, if it's an outside agency investigating it, they should be given the press conference. And they got enough sense not to give the press conference until, or some, I don't even think the GBI even gives press conferences after they do that. But if they got enough sense not to give a press conference because they're investigating, trying to figure out what's going on, why are you up there? The best thing we could say is, hey, there's also involved shooting and it's being investigated by the GBI. I think you're right on point with that. There's a death investigation. Now, of course, the media, well, what does it look like? And of course, if you got someone that don't understand what you just said, well, it looks like a suicide. Well, it looks like this and that. We don't want it. And I think the proper answer is what we're talking about. We don't want to say what it looks like, because sometimes what things look like, they're not. We want to do a thorough investigation, and then we will come up with a determination of what it is.
Right.
Because you let the media, and then there's no press conference where they don't come up with a bunch of silly questions at the end of it just to get something started.
Right.
So that's why it's just not a good idea. You're right. And with all of this, it's a death investigation. And then we're going to let the physical evidence and the facts, let those chips fall where they may, as opposed to saying, well, it looks like this and it looks like that.
Right. And I think, it could be a cultural thing. It could not be. But I think a little bit of what you were talking about, too, was, let's look at the behavior of the individual and just use some real world logic, right? Mm-hmm. You've got a confirmed argument right before the death.
Right.
That matters, okay? Because now this isn't just about mental state. It's about interaction. It's about escalation for sure. And now you layer it on that she's in a foreign country. She's separated. She's isolated. Who has the closest access to her? Her fiance. That doesn't make him guilty, though. Right. But it puts him right there in the center of the timeline. And then you have to look at the thing,
it
right?
makes him a suspect, but as an investigator, but what we do, we eliminate suspects all the time.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So
we got to look
everybody. If we go in a room and someone's dead, everyone in the room is a suspect until we eliminate it. But,
right. And in that room,
the problem with that is right now, I agree, he has to be eliminated. There could be something there, but at the same time, more than not have already convicted this man for murder.
Well, when he comes back into the States, he's definitely going to go ahead and feel that way, right? And the things that will go ahead and seal his fate is a little bit what you were talking about with the autopsy. So we're going to look at the closet. We're going to look at the belt. We're going to look at the neck. And you're going to be hearing about the possible inconsistencies right now. And that's where this investigators lean on these type of things. I know I do.
What's the inconsistencies?
So the inconsistency is right now the timeline. The timeline makes no sense. It doesn't matter where it's coming
But who
from.
gave the timeline? Did the media
Well, the
give the
timeline
timeline,
was
or he
given
gave
by
the timeline?
a portion of the family and when he called. So they're
Okay.
saying that there's an 11-hour gap. So we do have to talk about, let's talk about African East time. So right now we're here in Eastern time. That is about a 7 hours ahead of us at this point in time. So locals, they're going to go ahead and say local time, right? It's
Right.
natural. And this is why things can get lost in the fog of pain and tragedy, where people talk to them and naturally they're thinking that that's the time because they're living in their time, not so much
That's true.
Eastern time.
That's very true. But let me tell
Right.
you, at the end of the day, we got to narrow this down to one thing. Did he call 1 hour later, 13 hours later? Was it a mistake? All of that means absolutely nothing to those cameras.
Mm-hmm.
There's either footage of him going into that room or not. If they have those many cameras there, and there's proof that he was there before he went there with the security guard, that's a problem. Now we go, hey, we need to look at this. But if there is no camera footage of him going there before this happened, and then when they got there together, they found this, that clears them. So that camera footage is very, very important.
Well, the cameras are in the common areas, and that doesn't mean that there isn't blind spots all over the place.
All right. Okay. So then you would have to figure out that he studied all of the cameras and said, hey, I'm gonna find a blind spot way to get there. Then I'm gonna find a blind spot way not to get back there, and then go get security and go there. I'm not saying that's not possible.
Right.
It's possible,
It's possible.
but probably not probable.
I can
Okay.
tell you where the truth lies, and I'll tell you where the truth lies. More importantly,
Okay.
the truth right now lies in her phone and his phone. Phones don't lie. They tell you when someone was active, who they contacted, what were they thinking. So the real questions are, and the location, if it's triangulated properly. Was she using her phone after that argument? Who was she talking to? You're talking about.
But when you're talking about murder, I've seen cases like this before too. I've seen cases where a person talked about killing somebody. This was a case in Charleston, South Carolina, and he said, "Yeah, I'm gonna go." His exact words, "I'm gonna go rob the store."
Mhm.
And this fool didn't realize that someone had just robbed the store and killed somebody.
Mhm.
And guess who became the suspect?
Mhm.
Guess who they focus in on or whatever like that.
Sure.
But the
Confirmation
physical
bias.
evidence ended up showing that not only was it, well, I can't say the physical evidence completely showed that, because he ends up walking in the same store and stepping in blood, and now his footprints and everything is there. So it looks like it's him, but it's not. And then later it's proven that somebody else came in and killed the person, and they're able to match the ballistics and everything else.
Sure.
So it's not. I don't know if we can look. That's a clue. I mean, if he's on the phone saying, "I'm getting ready to come over there and kill you," that is a clue. But you got to
Sure.
simplify this. You got to simplify this.
Well, I'm talking about both phones.
There should be footage of him going there and at this particular time.
Right. There
If
should
those
be.
cameras are there. Right.
Right. But that's in a neat box. So if you do have the blind spots, and then if you have messages and you can't see that, and you have the messages where either they were deleted, drafts that were never sent, you have the totality of the circumstances, because behavior always leaves a trail. And this is a digital behavior that you have, and one of the hardest things to fake.
Right. But we've also seen situations where people have arguments, get emotional, and kill themselves. I mean, you had a situation like that in Baltimore with one of those guys, he gets an argument with his girlfriend, and then, "I'm going to kill myself," and he blows his brains out. She wasn't expecting that. Nobody was expecting that. And it can be easy to say, okay, well, I think she shot him, but that's not what happened.
Right.
So it's a 50-50 thing. So at that point, the only way to prove it one way or another is the physical evidence. If he
Mhm.
shot himself, the blood patterns are going to be there on the hand.
Right.
It's not going to be on her hand. So they could
Right.
be in the
If that was
same
the case.
room, right? And he said, "You know what? You're going to leave me. I'm going to kill myself." He blows his brains out in front of her. Okay, when you walk in, that's the job of a death investigator. Okay, well, you're saying he killed himself. Did you really shoot him, or did the other person shoot him? And
Mhm.
that's when the physical evidence tells the story. Now they could have been talking all kind of stuff. She could have said, "I don't care if you kill yourself or not," or she
Mhm.
could say, "I wish you were dead," but that don't mean she killed him,
No, 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 no. I
right?
mean, it comes back down to, what is best if somebody sends a message, and things can get translated in different ways. So certainly you got to leave some room for that, right? But you're also talking about a frame of mind that what people are typing. And remember, when they're typing this type of send, whether they're sending it or keeping it in drafts, it's still time coded. So you can also have where these locations are if it's pinged properly. Once again, it's a clue. I think it's a very big clue that they can get from both of their phones to be where they were at and what their state of mind is. And it's contemporaneous. So at that point in time, the courts are going to look at that if it was in the US more
I, I
favorably than somewhere else. Let's just
I
put it that way.
agree. I guess the question is it possible to get from where he was at to her room without being seen ahead of time? I
Sure.
can't even get in my house without being seen. I
Mhm.
cannot go in my house or in my driveway without being on camera.
Mhm.
There's cameras all the way around the house. So if I was involved in something bad, I would be filming myself leaving or coming. There's
Yeah.
no way anyone can get to my house, to the front door, the garage, or whatever without them being on film.
Right.
So
Right.
now, and right, and
I-
that's the way my last two houses were. There's no way to approach that house without being filmed. So
Well,
if there's a way to approach to get 10 minutes away to her without being on film,
mhm.
that you got to eliminate that. And if that doesn't exist, then there has to be video footage of him going there in order to do this. At the end of the day, that's the biggest thing right there. We could theorize, well, you know what, it was suspicious about this, it was suspicious about that, well, they were happy or she was happy, and well, they had an argument. At the end of the day, if someone did this to her, they should be on film going in there, be it
Well,
him or anybody else.
you're right. If it was pristine, and what I mean by that is it wasn't dark, um, wasn't storming. There's a million things that can
All these
score you.
cameras now have that night stuff on it. They're not expensive. The normal house like I have, you can see clearly at night.
Well, we're talking about U.S. technology. We don't know what type of technology they have over there.
But you're
So,
saying that Tanzania it has police that's trained by Britain. Different parts of Africa are different. I mean, when you're in Johannesburg, it's like the New York
mhm.
of Africa,
Your
and
premise is
there's
not wrong,
right.
but the possibility exists of these other things that complicate these matters.
I agree, but I'm not saying that you got a good point, but at the end of the day, if there are cameras there,
Mhm.
that tells the story.
Mhm.
If he did it, unless there's a way to get there past all these cameras,
Mhm.
okay. If they got him on there coming in there, okay, he's a guy. If
Right.
they don't, at the end of the day, it comes down to that. I know everybody wants a great murder mystery, but the cameras right here tells the story.
Yeah.
Unless you're going to say, well, they really only got one camera at this side and one camera there or whatever. And 9 times out of 10, with this being a resort and that type of resort, and especially with all of those animals, is a high probability they probably got a lot of cameras around there.
Well, yeah. I mean, you have, if you're taking a look at the location on there, but let's focus on something that a lot of people aren't going to talk about, but this certainly our show will, and I just think that it is worth mentioning, and this is on the medical side. because this matters more than people realize. And, exactly when she was found, how long was she unresponsive? This is all stuff that we need to find out medically. How long did somebody get to her? That when help was called. How long before she got medical attention? Because that window tells you a lot too. What could have been prevented, what couldn't, and sometimes what was delayed can also affect the case too. So,
Well, let me. Now that you mention that, let me tell you what makes it interesting. What made him go check on her with security?
and this is
Was it?
why I'm telling you why the phone means everything.
It
Even if
means.
you don't answer,
I
means a lot.
agree, but let me tell you why it means everything for or against him.
Hmm.
That's why I'm telling you this thing is 50-50. So let's say they had this big argument,
Hmm.
and let's say he's like, "Baby, I love you. I answer the phone, and she won't answer." And he's like, "Hey,
Hmm.
listen, she's not answering. Can y'all go with me and check her? Check her?" And video clearly shows security escorting them to there. Well, then that evidence is for him. That means it's not him. Okay, but if there's something on that phone different where there's threats, well, I just left there, and how do you feel now? Then that's against him. So you're right about that. But let's think about this. If he was trying to call her and didn't get an answer, or if, and we've seen this happen, I've seen this happen more times than I can forget. Hey, I just got through talking to my boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, and they said they're going to kill themselves. And I keep calling back and I can't get an answer. Can you go check? And we go and we find them dead.
Hmm.
I've seen that numerous times in my career, more times than I can think of not.
Right.
So that's another important thing. So the fact that if this is true, if he calls security and say, "Hey, I need to go there and check on her. I know y'all separated us, but I need to check on her because she's saying this and that." Because even though they separate them, it doesn't stop them from calling each other. They could be calling each other and cussing each other out, or calling each other and saying, "Let's work it out." Or one could be saying, "No, I don't want this anymore," and the other one saying, "Yeah, I do." But that evidence there is also 50-50.
Hmm.
Because if he couldn't reach her, or she said something, "Hey, look, I'm concerned. Look, I know y'all separated us. Can we go check on her? Please come with me. That way it's okay." That exonerates him. Or it can hang him if it's the exact opposite.
Well, yeah, that's why I felt like the phones are the telltale sign here, especially with our iPhones. Especially if your phones are discoverable to one another, it will go ahead and let you know how many feet from one another that you are. So if he has his phone on and she has her phone on, and they have it in close proximity to one another, it could be probably one of the more key factors and clues of this investigation if the investigation has the technology brought in, and they have that over there. I'm not sure if they do. So you're right about the 50-50. Things can go back and forth on that. However, I'm the CCTVs, not to say that they can be compromised, but you also have to go ahead and factor in how large the crowds were, what people were wearing. Can you really identify that individual? Was it dark out? So there's a lot of factors that go in as opposed to with a phone. Phone don't lie.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, we got to look backwards. So that means we're talking some elaborate stuff. I'm
Right.
going to disguise myself and move in with a crowd so no one can see, and then sneak into a room, and then I'm going to sneak back and then take security. Is it possible? Of course, it's possible. Probable, probably not. Let me tell you, either way this goes, this is not one of those ones where, okay, that we can say, okay, if it's a murder, I could be like, I thought I knew it all along. Or if it's a suicide, I knew it. Or,
Yeah.
well, I don't
Yeah.
believe. This could go either way, and it's very simple. There's some very simple things that can prove it one way or another. The sad part is while we're waiting for that, all this conjecture and everything else. Is it suspicious? Of course, let me tell you something. If that was my daughter,
Hmm.
and she went off with her fiance, and then next thing I look, someone told me, I would be very, very suspicious. You're going to have to eliminate the fact You're going to have to eliminate him as a suspect. I'm not just going to accept, no, he didn't do it.
Right.
And that's what's happening here. But unfortunately, in the world we're in now, he's already convicted.
Right. And that's true. And then let's take a look at what nobody is talking about either, which I find the lowest bar to go ahead and clear. But investigators have to do this all the time. We got to talk about money, the recent engagement, the travel, the expenses, any financial stress, any insurance policies, any recent changes, because money does always mean motive. But when it does,
but see, that's
it
where
goes
it
up
gets
real early.
But that's where it gets real interesting too. Who has the money in the situation? Is it
That's
her or
my
him?
part of my question too.
Right? Is she wealthy or is he the one that's wealthy?
Yeah.
Because if he's wealthy, then you can't say it's his motive to do that. If he's a wealthy one that hey, I'm proposing and he paid for the trip, well, that eliminates that right there. But now if she's wealthy and he took, I don't, and it's possible.
I can see it on both scenarios.
I've seen people with insurance policies on fiancés before. I've seen it, but then you would have to say, okay. We don't know. I get what you're saying. What you're saying is business is failing. He really didn't have enough money. He paid for it on a credit card, but he's on her insurance.
Could have been pissed off.
Anything's possible.
Right.
But before we get to any of that, those are great theories that need to be looked at. But you ain't got to go that far if the physical evidence is there.
Well, for sure,
Right. If he ain't on camera going in the room, or there's no physical evidence to show and it supports that, then you don't have to worry about all the far out theories. You worry about those theories when you got a whodunit and you got to come up with a motive. Now,
you might still have that.
You may still have that, but right now, okay, that becomes the key. If it's shown, okay, there's no way she could have killed herself, so this is a homicide. Then, okay, well, what was the motive? Okay, the two things that come at that point is, okay, it's a homicide. Okay, so who did it? Well, of course, he's the number one suspect, but that doesn't 100% mean it. It could have been somebody else that had killed her. You can't outrule that either. You can't say it has to be him.
Right.
So then you got to place someone on the scene because it could have been the maintenance man or something, and we don't want to be. We don't want to just say it had to have been a man. It could have been the maid or something, but we got to see who killed them. Once you figure out who killed them, then okay, what was the motive? So now we start digging. There was insurance policy. He was broke, but he really needed her money. All that's fine, but at the end of the day, you don't want to put the cart before the horse. First of all, is it a suicide or is it a homicide? That's the first thing that needs to be determined. Because if it's a suicide, then you're not looking for a killer because a killer is the person themselves. So you can't put the cart before the horse. It has to be in sequence. And the first thing that's important to figure out here is the cause of death. That's why it's always important. Because you go there and you work something like a homicide, now you're going all over the place and it's really a suicide, it's really a natural death, and you're looking for somebody that doesn't even exist and trying to build a theory around that.
Right.
Before we even get to that, is it a homicide? And I can't 100% tell you it's not.
Well,
but,
this case,
but there's a 50% chance that it could be a suicide.
Right. Well, this case lives only in 3 lanes.
Right.
So we got to be honest about that. And the 3 possibilities that could only be is self-harm, accidental death, for sure, and homicide.
Right. Now let's discuss that for a second with the accidental part. We have found accidental hangings. And, people think that, okay, they're committing suicide, but they're really not. Unfortunately, that happened to one of our childhood heroes, David Carradine. And what it is they're actually involved in some type of sexual masturbation. Right, autoerotic. And then unfortunately, what they're using gets too tight around the carotid artery and they end up passing out. And then the pressure gets more and more, and then they end up dying. So, everything is intent. They weren't intended to kill themselves.
Correct.
They were intended to get some type of accelerated
Pleasure.
pleasure
Right.
from what they were doing. So it's actually an accidental death, and it's not really a suicide by hanging. I'm not saying that's what happened in this case, and I don't want
Right.
to get wild out there. But that's what I'm saying with death investigations. You got to make that determination first before you can go to the rest. Because if it's that, okay, well, then that's what it is. If it's suicide, that's what it is. But if you look at it, no, it's neither one, is homicide. Okay, it's a homicide. Who killed her? Is it her fiance? Of course, he's going to be the first suspect we look at. But we got to make sure it's him, because we can't assume it's him when it could be the maintenance man or the maid. But then once we know it's him, then when we look for the motive, okay, is there an insurance policy? Was there an affair? Was there whatever? And then you go from there.
Right. Let's go ahead finally, and I want to go ahead and clean this up real quick. The FBI is not taking over this case. It's not happening. This is Tanzania. They own it. Now, could the U.S. get involved later? Yes. And if it turns out that one of the Americans killed the other one overseas, that's what's going to happen. There's a federal law for that. But here's the truth that nobody likes to talk about. They most always never happen. And you know why? It's because the time in the United States would step in. The case is already built, or it's already broken. And look, the FBI takes short things. And even when it comes, it's very, very rare. They even take cases like this on foreign soil. Now, of course, with terroristic stuff, they'll get jump right in there, because it's really has everything to do with geopolitics and so on and so forth. But as far as the FBI can't just fly in and take over the case. And many people think that.
But hopefully what will happen in that case is there's good relationships, and that they would be willing to let the FBI just look at it and act as an advisor. Hey, listen, it's your jurisdiction, but we would like to come in and assist and be an advisor and offer our technology and our knowledge or whatever.
Well,
And
that's
I
true.
think that can happen. I think that probably will happen.
Right. And so, yeah, the Tanzania can lead locally, and the FBI can assist, and they could potentially prosecute later if the evidence supports murder
Yeah.
and if the statute fits. But most likely that's not going to be the case. And I just want to prepare people, because they really do. We just had an incident like that in Mexico. If you remember, this lady, she had went with her friends.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, she meant well, but they got into a scrap. She was killed. Her neck was broken. And, the Mexican authorities are like, hey, guess what? We believe this is what happened. The FBI has yet to charge anyone in that case. And they usually stay away from that type of stuff, which brings me to our larger point on that. I even hate to say this online, but it goes to say that if you are on foreign soil, and I just want to tell our viewers this, if you are on foreign soil, you assume all the risk and the likelihood of you being with someone that is dangerous and they do something to you. You assume all that risk, and justice may never come to your family. There's a strong possibility of that happening. And you got to hope that you're in countries that has some reciprocity in there, or they recognize the United States as an ally to help assist you. Because if you're not, you're going to be woefully sorry about that. And that's just how that is, Unfortunately, what do they usually tell us? If you want to go ahead and kill somebody, you could stage it as a car accident, and more likely in the United States, that's probably one of the ways to go in and take someone else. Well, if you're on foreign soil, you take somebody to foreign soil if you want to take somebody out. Go to a place where that jurisdiction is weak and doesn't have the technology.
We've
could take
seen that
people out.
happen. We've seen that happen, unfortunately.
Right, right. So, of course, we understand that this case isn't about one detail. Of course, the timeline, the behavior, the location, the response all matter right now. But I think the question that we need to ask our viewers, because many of them are pretty good sleuths and detectives, what stands out to you most about this case? As of right now, it's Thursday, April 16th, and this episode will air on the 18th. A lot can happen within 48 hours. So let's see what happens, brother, as this comes on, as we, go ahead and land this plane.
Absolutely.
And for everyone out there, please continue to like, subscribe, and certainly follow all of our social media handles. And we'd like to hear from you, more importantly. Without further ado, brother, we're at it again. Thank you.
This is the Hill of Justice.